This is one of the most confusing topics in the Italian language, and I am talking about verbi riflessivi. It is especially challenging for native English speakers because this is something that they do not have in their grammar. But here is everything you need to know to understand, recognize, and use verbi riflessivi. As a starting point, the infinite form of these verbs will always have si at the end. For example, alzarsi, lavarsi, svegliarsi. Normal verbs, in fact, usually ends in are, ere, ire, but this is not the case for reflexive verbs. And it is exactly this si particle that's unique to reflexive verbs that tell us that when we conjugate these verbs, we do not only have to conjugate the verb, but we also have to conjugate the particles. To make it super clear, let's start with a normal verb, lavare, to wash. The way you conjugate this verb is pretty standard. You remove the ending in are and you add all the ending for the present. The endings will be o, I, a, iamo, ate, ano. Now, when you conjugate the reflexive form of this verb, lavarsi, you will have to also conjugate the particle. In other words, we will have to conjugate this si part of lavarsi and then normally lavare, the main verb. And it would look like this. Io mi lavo, tu ti lavi, lui lei si lava, noi ci laviamo, voi vi lavate, loro si lavano. If you notice, the only difference between lavare and lavarsi is that in the reflexive form, you will have to conjugate also the particles. What would be also different, however, is the meaning, because lavare means to wash something. Lavarsi means to wash oneself. And this is exactly the essence of the reflexive verbs. They are called this way because the action reflects on the subject. Io lavo la macchina means I wash the car. Io mi lavo means I wash myself. And this is also the case for other verbs like alzare versus alzarsi. Alzare means to lift something up. Alzarsi means to lift yourself up, which essentially means to get up of bed. Now, the last thing you want to remember is that the particles mi, ti, si, ci, vi, si are always before the verb. Io mi lavo, tu ti alzi. Unless we are using the infinite, imperative, or gerundio. Only in these three tenses, the particle will come after the verb. Lavati, wash yourself. Or alzati, get up from bed. In both cases, we use the imperative, and as you can see, the particle is after the verb. I guess the main takeaway you should have is that when you encounter reflexive verbs, you should not freak out. They conjugate exactly like any other verb, you just have to remember to add the particle. I hope this was helpful enough, but let me know in the comments if you're still confused. Oh yeah, and don't worry about my end, I'm fine, it's just too much sport. As always, enjoy learning Italian.